access the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Happy holidays, Green Lantern fans. This is episode number 153 of the podcast of OA. I'm your jolly old St. Nick, Myron Rumsey, and I'm joined by my number one elf, Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, how are the holidays treating you?
St. Louis is great, my friend. Today was my last day of work. Don't go back till January 6th, so I got some nice restful time off. So I plan on living it up, man. It's going to be a good time. I get caught up in a lot of comics that I've been neglecting, and I really want to get caught up on all those, and still got to finish up some shopping, but everything's great, man. And we're getting ready for the baby, so nursery's all done, and we're all ready to go.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I'm pretty much ready for the Christmas holiday. All the Christmas shopping is done. Tree is not completely decorated, but we're going to resolve that issue tomorrow. And we're ready to go. The only thing I didn't do, we were talking before we started recording, we're going to be talking about the Larfleeze Christmas Special. And the one thing I was going to do was make me some Larfleeze cookies to sit here while we're talking, but to devour them while we were talking, but I just didn't get around to it.
Well, I got the recipe again because I relived this book since I haven't read it in a while. And I'm going to do them this week. I think I'm going to try to push for Sunday or Monday. I'm going to do them this week. So I'm looking forward to it. I'll post my review on Twitter.
You'll be the Gordon Ramsay of the Green Lantern universe.
That's right. That's right.
But so we're going to be talking about the Larfleeze Christmas Special from 2010. And then we've got a bunch of Green Lantern stuff to talk about. And since it's the end of the year, we're the last episode of 2019, I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the things we want to see in 2020 and in the next decade.
I love it. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, well, friends, we're going to take a quick break. Get yourself some Larfleeze cookies if you've got them. Grab yourself some eggnog or some milk and come back in a minute, and we're going to be talking about this special.
I love it. I'm so looking forward to this.
Listen up, Lanterns. It's time you took the oath with Green Lantern John Stewart. In brightest day, in blackest night, don't let the podcast of Oa escape your sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
All right, Myron. I've been looking forward to this. This is going to be a good time. It's a good story. Everybody kick back in your favorite robe, sit by the fire, sit by the Christmas tree, and listen to some good old-fashioned Grinch. All right, so we began our story with Larfleeze standing in front of his Christmas tree. And it says, some questionable readers may tell you that Christmas has nothing but a crass, commercialized, capitalist concoction. And to that, I argue, invariably, every holiday season. But perhaps what Christmas needs is a fresh pair of eyes to sense the magic of this winter festival. So let's take a trip through the holiday season with a creature of unquenchable avarice. Traveling from far across the universe to Earth, the Orange Lantern, known as Larfleeze, has discovered the existence of a powerful being who bestows gifts to everyone on December 25th. Making Earth his new home, Larfleeze eagerly has counted down the moments to Christmas morning when he'll get all he's put on his list from the all-powerful and all-seeing guardian known as Santa Claus. What a great intro.
Yeah. This is a great Geoff Johns Brett Booth collaboration. And this opening picture, just look at that Christmas tree. I mean, the whole end is tipped over because he's got a bowling ball as an ornament.
It's a mess.
It's just ludicrous.
There's like a mannequin arm on there.
And I mean, he's got everything in there, including the kitchen sink, literally.
Yeah, he really does. A mannequin arm. Where did he get that from? Who knows?
I'm afraid to find out. And there's poor Glommy sitting by the fireside below, just kind of laying there, like he's just picked out on Larfleeze cookies or something, because he's just laying there and he's probably half asleep. But what a great start. And what I love about how Johns writes Larfleeze, or how he wrote Larfleeze, I should say, because he doesn't write him anymore, but was that Larfleeze is somewhat of a humorous character, but he's also a terribly tragic character in that he can't control himself. And so he can go from this ludicrous, he's here waiting for Santa because Santa's going to deliver all of his gifts. He's so naive in that regard, but that he could snap at any second and kill a Santa if he didn't get what he wanted. And that was what was so wonderfully interesting about how Geoff wrote Larfleeze versus when they did the Larfleeze series, it was all done for yucks. And here there is comedy, but it's very situational comedy, in that the character isn't marginalized in any way, and that the humor makes sense.
Yeah, I kind of liken the Larfleeze like a dog chasing its tail. You're never going to catch it because he does the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, expecting the same outcome, but it always ends up tragic, and at his humor. He just becomes the brunt of the joke.
Right. And that's really the thing. And this goes back to, remember in 2010, we're not too far removed from Blackest Night and seeing all the different colors of the emotional spectrum coming into full play during the Blackest Night saga. But that Geoff's whole theory was that the further away from the center of the emotional spectrum you go, the more the power controls you than you control the power. And Larfleeze is literally... he's a slave to the orange power battery. As much as he wants it has him completely.
Right. I agree. It's crazy. I love him. He's a great character and he's unique, and he stands alone as he should, because obviously he's greedy as all get out, but he's in the Christmas spirit in this book. He's really got a Christmas spirit, but we see an ultimate change in our beloved character throughout the book. And it takes one person in particular to help him with that change, though.
Santa Claus.
Santa Claus. Not only Santa Claus, but Hal Jordan.
But yeah, Larfleeze is holed up in Minnesota. He's got a whole junkyard, and you see Glomulus sleeping on the floor full of, all these clothes, and it's ludicrous. And Larfleeze wakes up on Christmas morning, and he goes downstairs to find that Santa didn't leave him any gifts. And especially with the size of his Christmas list. Right, because it's probably about 50 pieces of paper, if not more, taped together. It's funny. And he goes down, there's nothing there. He's outraged that there's nothing there. And he says, we've been robbed, and he's going on and on about this whole thing about who would steal from the mighty Santa Claus. And then he talks about the funny line of the Christmas barter. The cookies were left out for the red-suited giant. The cookies are still here, as if the tribute that he's left out for Santa Claus has been left because maybe it wasn't good enough for Santa. I don't know.
Which is disrespectful to Larfleeze, it feels like,
Yeah.
He kind of took it a little bit personal. So what Larfleeze does in his defense is on the next page. He gives you his beautifully Larfleeze's Orange Lantern cookies, which I haven't made them yet. Haven't tasted them. I can't attest to them, but I'm sure that a ton of fans did during the time when this book came out. But I'm going to be doing them next week, and I'll let you guys know next episode.
Yeah, we'll have to have a review. We failed, Phil. We should have done this beforehand.
We should have. But what you can do is post the screenshot of his recipe on your website. That'd be cool.
Yeah. I think it's out there. It may be out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was neat that Geoff kind of goes meta and shares the recipe with fans, which I thought was really cool. And this happens a couple times in this book. It happens a couple more points later on. But he talks, he basically examines the house that he's in. He's basically got this house to kind of be Santa friendly. And there's not, the cookies aren't touched, the milk isn't touched, there's the soot in the chimney hasn't been disturbed in any way, shape, or form. He's built this cabin as a signal that he's there, and it didn't work. And Larfleeze is just beside himself.
His poor house. And the funny thing about Larfleeze is when he's looking around the house, it's like he's doing all these checkpoints on different protocols he needed to follow to get Santa Claus to come to his home.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's neat, if you have the book digitally, it's easier to see, but at certain points of this book, when Larfleeze has his list in his hand, you can kind of see some of the things that are on it. And of course, there's some very ludicrous stuff on there, which I find hysterically funny. But his whole manner is affected once he sees Santa on TV.
Yep.
And that really just sets him right off. And he's like, vengeance will be mine. And he is off after Santa.
So basically completely thrashing a nice parade.
Yeah, he makes an orange construct of a sleigh with these maniacal reindeer, and yeah, he trashes a parade. And the poor Santa, the beard snaps off Santa's chin and hits Glomulus in the side of the head.
He calls him a decoy.
Yeah. And then he looks up and he sees another Santa going into a store. And did you catch the name of the store?
Oh, hold on, let me look again.
It's DC's store and stuff.
That's cool. Didn't catch that at first. That's interesting.
But he follows that Santa in. So, these poor shoppers are in there, and Larfleeze comes plowing through with this orange construct sleigh and reindeer looking for Santa. And he rounds the corner, and then you see like all the blood drain from his face as his jaw drops open. And he's like, what trickery is this? And he's rounded a corner while people are returning their Santa costume rentals.
And then he can't figure out which is the real Santa Claus.
It's ludicrously funny, but at no point is Larfleeze being made a fool of. You know what I mean? And that's what I love about the way this is written.
And it's funny because nobody's like really, really scared of him, but like the kid on this page, he automatically big smile on his face.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone knows the real Santa Claus lives at the North Pole. And then Larfleeze, which way is that? It's like, okay, you're talking to a friggin' alien here.
And then again, he goes a little meta. Geoff gives us the creative team gives us a little bit of a maze as we help Larfleeze get to the North Pole, which I thought was cute because there's little cartoons there that show, a Yeti chasing Larfleeze and Glomulus, and even Larfleeze stumbling across the Fortress of Solitude.
That was cool. That's pretty cool.
But you help Larfleeze get to the North Pole by doing the maze, and he gets there. And there's nobody there. He gets there, and there's absolutely nobody. So he's starting to, melt the North Pole because his rage is now seething. And who shows up? Hal. Hal's followed him to the North Pole, and Hal's trying to teach him a lesson about what Christmas is all about. And there's some neat little construct things there. You've got this giant polar bear hugging Larfleeze, and then Larfleeze inflates the polar bear with a Christmas tree, and then Hal makes a giant wood chipper that chews up the Christmas tree.
And their banter is really humorous. I like the way they're talking.
Yeah, it's great. And
poor Larfleeze, why are you interrupting my hunt for your devious fat man, Green Lantern?
It's funny because he talks about his Christmas list and then Hal really kind of sets him straight, and I think it's a very appropriate story because I am just as guilty of this as anybody else is. You get wrapped up in the stuff, in buying people's stuff, and that's it's important to show people how you feel and how you care, and you care enough to take the time to buy them a gift. But the gluttony and the mass commercialism that has taken over the Christmas holiday, it really is a social thing that's happened with our country. And I'm not sure if it's like that in other parts of the world, but it's become this big thing versus.
Well, it's a show now, because it immediately starts once Thanksgiving ends.
Right.
And then it becomes this show, this extravaganza.
And, the whole thing where Hal has to try to convince Larfleeze that Santa's not real. And he's like, why would somebody make this up?
And then, of course, Hal, being the stand-up man that he is, tries to talk him into the Christmas spirit.
Yeah, he talks Larfleeze into giving up all of his stuff. And again, when you flip the page, you can cut out this little pyramid and fold it and make a Larfleeze ornament.
I'm going to do that for next year, by the way.
Yeah, I'm going to print it out. I don't want to cut my original copy up. I'm going to take the digital version and print it out and do that. And it's neat. The tabs where you put the glue to glue it together, it says, I want glue. So it's, Geoff Johns and Brett Booth are all in on this, clearly.
Well, and it's unique. It's a standalone. It's a Christmas special. They don't do a lot of these a lot of the times, and this one kind of, like I was saying earlier in the episode, this one kind of just hints at that whole Grinch Christmas kind of concept,
Right.
Yeah, it's fun. I loved reading it again. I couldn't wait to read it when we talked about doing this episode.
Well, and then they go back to Minnesota, and Hal's there with the junkyard, and he's looking at all this stuff, and he's like, I thought your collection was just a pile of junk, but looking closer, I see presents. And so he convinces Larfleeze to give away all of his stuff. And there's this great part where these kids are all flocking around Larfleeze, and he's like, unhand me human spawn.
I love it. I love Larfleeze.
And all this stuff is given away. And Hal's like, it's about the exact opposite, the power that flows through your ring. It's about generosity. And when you use generosity to make others smile, that means you have Christmas spirit. And right now, thanks to giving all your stuff away, you have it. And Larfleeze looks around and sees there's nothing there but a toilet sitting in the front yard. And he goes, I don't think I like Christmas spirit very much.
Poor Larfleeze. And then of course he comes back with the rhetoric that he has to have his stuff.
Yes. and he's asking for hovercraft.
And that brings up what you say, about you want your stuff, man. It's just stuff, you want to have your stuff.
There's a spot where Hal's looking at the list, and he says, you don't listen, do you? You only hear what you want to hear. And Larfleeze says, doesn't everyone? And then Hal looks at the list and he goes, a hovercraft? You have a ring that can make anything you can imagine. What do you need something like a hovercraft for? And Larfleeze quickly responds, they drive on land and sea.
I mean, the rhetoric is humorous. You could just hear these two going back and forth with this banter. And it would just be so comedic to watch these guys interacting.
Yes. And then Hal asks Larfleeze the tough question. Look at the list and ask yourself, do you really need it? And that's an important thing. And Larfleeze then goes back and he's looking through his whole list. And what does he need? His family. And it's an unfortunate thing that never got resolved. But Larfleeze apparently, because of his obsession and the things caused by becoming the Orange Lantern, he has been separated from his family and he doesn't know where his family is.
Yeah. It's kind of a sad last page. Though it's funny, though, if you zoom in on some of his Christmas stuff, his Christmas items, one of them says peanut butter and sardines.
Yeah.
Toothpaste and brush. It has brake job with a question mark.
Yeah. Roast beast is on the bottom.
Oh, what a great comic, man. Just a fun, great comic.
Well, and then after that, we get, an Art Balthazar and Franco, Where Did Glomulus Go? Cartoony style adventure where Glomulus goes through and explores all the different colors of the emotional spectrum. And in their traditional humor that those two creators have, it's very cartoony and kiddish, but yet there's a lot of neat little funny things. Like, I didn't realize Sinestro didn't like butterscotch.
This looks like a lot like Powerpuff Girls,
Yeah. Well, it goes along with their whole. I can't remember the name of the book that they did, but they did a whole bunch of cartoons like this, of comic strips like this. And I love, like, when Glomulus goes to Odom to visit with the Blue Lanterns, they have to say hope in every sentence.
I'm hoping for good weather. I hope so too.
What can we hope to?
Brother Worth.
Yeah, and he goes, what can we hope to help you with? And then he takes their Bluebird of Hopefulness, and then he goes, I hope he treats him well. I hope so too.
and then onward to the quick little jaunt to Isomalt.
Yeah, and he goes to the fruitcake. He has a fruitcake.
Motion sickness, from space travel and such. Have a fruitcake. I love it.
Yeah,
Atrocitus with a fruitcake.
Yeah. And then they go to goes to the Zamorons, and they make a whole joke about the whole thing about violet versus purple, or
and pink, and they throw the pink in there.
Yep. Yeah. And then they have to use the love in every sentence too,
which is cute because I like Carol Ferris on here. She's really cute.
Yeah.
I wonder whatever happened to Fatality. That's Fatality right there, I think.
Yeah, we haven't seen it.
No, that's sad. Anyway, moving on. On to the unknown planet.
Yep, it goes and visits the Indigo tribe, and
which is kind of odd. I thought they would have put the Indigo tribes like lettering on here.
Yeah, it was interesting. They didn't do any knock jokes.
Yeah.
I was waiting for that, but. And then he goes back to Minnesota, and Glomulus gives him a whole bunch of presents that he's gotten from the other parts of the emotional spectrum. And there's a rabbit there, and I don't get the joke for the rabbit, but it ties into the little comic strips that they did.
It's cute, love it.
Yep, and that was really the entire issue. But boy, what fun!
It is. It's unique. It's a standalone. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of tie-ins. I mean, if I don't. They had the Orange Lantern book that ran for 12 issues. That was after Blackest Night, obviously. But I don't know if did you ever read any of those? That was pretty good.
The Larfleeze ones. I bought the first 2 issues and I stopped reading it because I felt that they made too much fun with. I mean, there were like a lot of fart jokes, and it was just guffaw humor and not this kind of very situational, very character-driven humor.
I gotcha.
So I ended up not liking it, and I didn't. It's one of those times where I as a Green Lantern fan, sometimes I struggle with the sense of needing to read it all, but at the same time, if I don't like it, should I endorse it by buying it? You know what I mean?
That makes sense, because I struggle with the same thing. Which, by the way, segueing into that, we could talk about that at some point. Far Sector was like that. I struggled with reading it because I felt like I needed to read it because it was related. But, sometimes you got to ask yourself, does the enjoyment of it kind of supersede that? Because you want to be able to invest yourself in a comic book. You want to enjoy reading it. And if it doesn't have any kind of attraction, it kind of starts to deepen over each issue. And then you find yourself getting more embroiled in it, and then it's harder to let go, or you just want to let go of it altogether because you've wasted so much time.
Right. Well, that was the Larfleeze Christmas Special, and one of the things I want to remind people of, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. You remember a few months ago, we did an interview with Ian Harrington, who did a radio drama with I knew I was going to say it wrong. Rot Fan. It was called A Green Lantern Ring of Victory, and it was that audio drama he did. He previously did a motion comic of this very Larfleeze Christmas Special, complete with voice acting and everything. He did that back in 2016, and I will put a link to that video in the show notes, because it's certainly a great way to experience this book, because it's got voice acting. Now, it's not done as a cartoon. It's, very crude animation, but he's tried to bring it to life like a motion comic, like if you've ever seen those before, where they kind of take some of the parts of the frame and animate it very crudely, or move shapes within the frame and that kind of thing, but with sound effects and voices, and it really adds something to the experience. It's actually become something I watch every Christmas Eve since he did this for the last couple of years. I've been doing it every Christmas Eve just because it's a neat way to experience it. So
that's really cool. I'll have to check it out. I don't think I've ever seen it.
Highly recommended. So we want to do some talking about some other Green Lantern stuff. So let's pause for a minute. I know I need to wet my whistle, and we'll come back and we'll start talking about some other Green Lantern stuff.
All right.
All right, Brother Phil. Well, there's some little bits of Green Lantern stuff here and there to talk about. And, a couple things I want to talk about in particular was that Liam Sharp and Steve Oliff were nominated for the Best Art Team of the Year by IGN. And there was a fan vote for, the fan favorite. And they won by a considerable margin, which is great. And then speaking of Liam Sharp, for all those people who won the Liam Sharp Green Lantern prints from our 150th episode contest giveaway, all of those have all been shipped. In fact, most of the people have already gotten all of their stuff, have gotten their print, and I did a little certificate of authenticity to go with it. And people have been getting them. I think by the time this episode airs, because I want to release this on Christmas Eve, by the time this episode airs, everyone should have gotten them. And I've actually seen some people posting pictures on our Facebook group and on Twitter showing them getting their prints. So that's really exciting to see people. I mean, I'm glad they're getting it right around the Christmas time, which is what I was kind of shooting for, and kind of making their holiday a little bit and giving them something special. It was an exciting thing and fun thing to do. But
Very cool.
We're this week that we're recording this, Doomsday Clock number 12 came out after, it ends a 2-year 12-issue miniseries. Did you read it at all, Phil?
No, I dropped it. I got tired of waiting for it. I mean, I'm not trying to say that to be real mean to the fans that did enjoy it, but I don't know. It got convoluted, and I understand what they're trying to do, but I got tired of waiting for the delays were always coming, and it was like taking forever. And then I couldn't remember what I read the issue before. And then it got to be more of a hassle. And this goes back to what I said prior, and I couldn't deal with it. I just wanted to let it go.
I'm kind of, after reading this last issue, I don't know if it was delays based on the creative team. Was it Geoff Johns and Gary Frank, or was it DC? Because in some of the things that happened in this last issue, a little while ago, a couple episodes back, we were talking about the whole 5G thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's made reference in this last issue.
Yeah, no. There's a lot of hubbub about it. I mean, I don't think they've ever come out and announced anything about it yet, but there's a lot. It's like it has to do with that whole replacement of characters, and I don't know, man. I'm a little skeptical about the whole whatever it is,
Well, what's interesting, and this is why I wonder if the delay was by DC itself, was editorial holding it back, because they make references to the 5G stuff, and they talk about specifically things that happen in 2020. So I find it ironic that this issue comes out in December of 2019, when some of the things that this book talks about are going, it starts predicting some of the future stuff. Like the book ends with Dr. Manhattan, because how he can look into the past and to the future at the same time. And he starts talking about the future. And one of the things that happens is he restores the JSA. And for Green Lantern fans, when he restores the JSA, obviously that means Alan Scott. But in the image they show has Jade in it as well.
That would be cool. I haven't seen Jade in quite some time, and I miss that character.
That was cool. And then they talk about how, and I'm still trying to unpack this a little bit myself, but it makes us sound like, how we're used to the multiverse. The multiverse and the metaverse are almost two different things. And the metaverse is basically that every incarnation, every change in DC Comics history has revolved around Superman. And every time there's been a major change, that Earth becomes Earth 1. So that explains kind of how Earth 1 eventually becomes Earth 2, and a new Earth 1 is formed, and so on and so forth.
Kind of like reformulating itself, and that kind of working down the number system. So like every time a major event happens, a new Earth is created, and the next one goes down the number chain.
Right. And they talk about, for example, Earth 1 became Earth 1985 after the Crisis on Infinite Earths. And then after Flashpoint, there was a Flashpoint Earth. And then Earth 52, for the new 52 era stuff, Earth 52 got created. And then he looks to the future, and it says, in the year 2020, Superman's timeline is bombarded by the reckless energies of the old gods, once again warping the metaverse. And then it says, now it's July 2nd, 2025, a crisis unlike the metaverse has ever seen, one they will call the Masters erupts. And in this wake, Superman is revitalized and his greatest allies return. And in the background, you see Alan, and you see John and Hal and Jessica and Guy. No Kyle, no Simon. But you also see some characters, like you see what looks like the Luke Fox Batman in the background. You see what looks like a different version of Wonder Woman, as well as the Wonder Woman we're familiar with, all there at the same time. And so it goes on. I want to go through everything through it, but they talk about Earth 5G being born and there being a secret crisis. And it talks about a brawl across the universe with Thor and a green behemoth stronger than Doomsday who dies protecting Superman, which alludes to a DC Marvel crossover.
See, and I was reading about that, because I mean everybody was posting stuff about it and everything, and I I mean, but you're right, and then also this coincided with the end of the television series.
Right.
Right. So maybe this was by design. I mean, I guess maybe it was.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't like you. It got hard to keep up with it because there was so much time in between issues that I want to sit down now and reread all 12 issues back to back because I think it'll be easier to read it. But a couple of other things that I thought was of interest was when they're showing some different things in the wake of this event, and they show some ships. Say that 5 times fast. Showing up in Metropolis, and you see the Interceptor from Green Lantern the Animated Series. And you see Alan Scott talking to the media about the Superman theory, and Jade is right by his side. So
that's really cool.
It implies that she's back, and how this is going to tie into DC proper, I don't know, but that's kind of exciting. I'm kind of concerned that they didn't show Simon Baz and Kyle. They also don't show Teen Lantern in that picture, and they don't show Joe Mullen. But does that mean anything? I don't know. Well, we'll have to see.
Simon Baz has been missing for quite some time now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because he's a Lego minifigure. And so they're doing little, he was in the Dear Justice League book. So it's kind of just, it's odd. I don't know what DC's doing with this stuff. But I thought for the end of the series, like I said, I'm still trying to wrap my head around some of it because it's pretty dense. But it was interesting to see the references to 5G and the references to Alan Scott and Jade and just the oddness of seeing those Green Lanterns. And was it just because Brett Booth was like, I'm not going to put all of them here because I'd have a whole panel of Green Lanterns? Did he just choose a few to put in there? I don't know.
Okay, well, here's an interesting thought, too. I'll throw this little wrench in here. Crisis on Infinite Earths is taking place over there at CW, which, by the way, if nobody's watching that, watch it. It is fantastic. It's phenomenal. And, that could have something to do with what they're gearing towards, too, because that ends in January.
True. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But I thought it was worth discussing, or at least talking about a little bit, that if you gave up on it, maybe wait for the trade.
Yeah, I mentioned the same thing, like when it's all collected, or when they're all finally out, I'll just sit there and read through them all digitally.
There was nothing greatly tremendous in terms of Green Lantern stuff in it, but I felt that the return of, we knew the JSA was coming back, but seeing Jade there, I think was important.
Yeah, it seems like DC's really going back and pulling out some of their older characters that they haven't used in a while. I mean, Adam Strange is a prime example. I mean, they don't utilize that character that much, and now he's being brought back. The Wonder Twins were just back for a brief stint. It's kind of cool. It's kind of see him. It's nice to see that DC can tap into those older characters and make them relevant again, like Alan Scott. I mean, that's where it all began.
Right. Well, and Alan Scott, there's a new Funko Pop coming out of Alan Scott, and 2020 is the 80th anniversary of Green Lantern. So maybe we're going to see something.
I've always been a big fan of Alan Scott. I like this character.
Yeah. And apparently Alan Scott's going to be on the Stargirl show.
That would be cool. And that I'll watch. It's funny. Like, you always think back to when these big the films come out. Like, I'll bring up Green Lantern for that instance, and then automatically you just resort to the fact that, there needs to be a Hal Jordan in there. But when you think about what DC's doing with all this different universe building and different characterizations that they're going with, if you throw an Alan Scott in a show like Stargirl, and then you throw like a Simon Baz and somebody else on another show or whatnot, and then of course you have your big tiered programming, which would be your movie or whatnot. Who would you put in that kind of role? I mean, would it essentially be Hal Jordan, or are they trying to reinvent characters or bring them back and make them relevant again, like Alan Scott? And go with him being the spearheader of the Green Lantern Corps.
Yeah, I don't know. I think with Stargirl that it's going to be via flashback because they're going to talk about Stripe and Starman from their team up and stuff. I think that's where we're going to see Alan from. But who knows? Who knows what they're going to do? I'm excited to see it. I hope we get to see a lot of stuff. But that leads us into my next topic. We're at the end of a year. This is our last episode of 2019. What would you like to see in 2020?
I want to see. I'd like to see that. I want to see Green Lantern Year 2 do really well. The first year was really, really good. I'd like to see the second part of it do just as well as the first one. I'd like to see it do better, and I'd like to see him I kind of want to see Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp expand on it a little bit more. I wish they would bring in other characters like, Sinestro Moore, Saronic Natu, Kilowog, anything. Start bringing other, because I want to see Liam Sharp draw a bunch of these characters. But that's one thing. I'd like to see more Green Lantern stuff instead of all this Batman stuff.
You knew Batman was going to work his way in this episode somewhere.
Everywhere, man. It's like Batman in your face. It's so sad because every time I look at the pull list that comes out every week with all these comic books, it's like Batman takes up like at least 50% of the titles. Anyway, I digress. More Lantern stuff. I'd like to hear more news about what's being done with Green Lantern. I don't like the veiled process. I mean, I understand that there's a shock and awe favor to it and surprise factor, but I also like companies to be transparent with what they're trying to do. And I feel that Warner Brothers, with what they're doing with their stuff, they have this secret formula that they're trying to keep from everybody, so nothing's alluded to or nobody figures it out. I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's like, just give the fans some stuff. Disney's always been good at that with Star Wars. They give fans their tidbits. It'd just be nice if Warner Brothers and hence DC started being more transparent about their ideas. Or not ideas and not full revelations, but at least something for the fandoms.
Yeah, I'd like to see some breadcrumbs when it comes to the Green Lantern Corps movie. I'd like to hear a release date. I'd like to hear a director, and I'd like to see the casting. I hope we get that during 2020. We know we're going to hear more about the HBO show, so I'm not going to even mention that because that's a foregone conclusion. Sure. But I'd also like to see maybe some expansion of the Green Lantern universe in terms of the number of books. I think when season 2 of the Green Lantern is over, if not before, during that run, I'd like to see them at least announce another book. Hopefully a book that isn't creating more Green Lanterns, but using the ones we've got. Right. I think they're woefully underserved at this point, and which kind of leads into Far Sector. It kind of makes you wonder what they're doing with that character, because somebody mentioned something about her being involved in this whole 5G program. Yeah, Bleeding Cool was saying that it was either going to be her or the Teen Lantern that was going to be the Green Lantern in 5G. Who knows if that's accurate or not? I don't know. I mean, at one point they were saying Far Sector was part of its own continuity, but they've also said, talked about how it does tie in. So it does. I've read the first 2 issues. And we can talk about it next month whenever we do the next program. But there is some tie-in to it. So I think it is definitely in continuity. But, I'm hoping we get another book with some of the characters that are not being serviced right now. I don't want to see a book with all Earth Lanterns in it, because I think I'm woefully missing some of the Green Lantern supporting cast that we've seen over the years. I think one of the things I loved about the Robert Venditti Van Jensen era was the creation of some new alien Green Lanterns that were very intriguing characters, and getting to see them interact with each other and with the human lanterns. I think that's something that we're missing. This is a story that takes place with all these wacky aliens, but we've crowded the panels with so many Earth characters that those characters kind of take a back seat, and I really want to see them come to the forefront. Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, speaking of Venditti, he's writing Justice League now. Yeah, he got the Justice League book, which will be interesting. The other thing I'd like to see is some more merchandising. I think, with this being the 80th anniversary, the only things we've really heard about so far is the 80th anniversary hardcover and the Funko Pop of Alan Scott. I'd like to see some more of that kind of stuff. I'd like to see an animated film announced, another one. I got a question for you. Would you purchase, let me rephrase that. Would your wife let you purchase a Funko Pop of the Green Lantern Corps, and it had like it had the Guardians in there, maybe 3 of them, a little bit smaller ones, and then it had the Green Lantern Corps. It had like Sinestro, it had Hal Jordan, has them all in there. Maybe let's say it's a pack of 20, and it ran you $119. Would you buy it? Or would your wife let you buy it? I won't care if she'd let me buy it or not. I'd buy it.
Merry Christmas to Myron.
I don't think that falls into a permission clause in the relationship.
I mean, how cool would that be if they did make a set like that? That'd be neat.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, we're going to have Alan. We've had a couple versions of Hal. We've had a movie version of Sinestro. We've had a White Lantern version of Kyle. We've had a version of John Stewart. And then the last DC Legion of Collectors box, which was a Green Lantern box, had Guy, Chip, and Kilowog in it.
Mm-hmm. That's the ones I got. Yeah, I only have, I got those three and I got Hal Jordan. Those are the only 4 lanterns I got. There's
also a Big Bang Theory Leonard Hofstadter as Green Lantern 1 out there.
Yeah, I think I got. Is it the Leonard? I got the one with Sheldon in the Green Lantern shirt too.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah, I wish they'd make more of those. That's a good call. Yeah,
I'd like to see. Even if it isn't Funko Pops, I'd like to see some more Lantern stuff. It's interesting. For the longest time, there wasn't a lot of Green Lantern merchandise, and then during the Geoff Johns era, it really exploded. For the longest time, I was able to be a completionist, and during the height of the Geoff Johns era, it got to the point where I could not keep up with it all.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff. I remember it coming out, especially all those Blackest Night figures. I mean, I still have most of them. They're at my folks' house, and man, I loved them. I mean, they were just Mongol. I mean, he was just huge. And Black Hand had that cool little transparent Batman head.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those were all cool.
I got all of those, but the ones that I missed were the San Diego Comic-Con exclusives of Hal and his different versions of the different lanterns.
Yeah, I didn't get those either.
I did get the Hal as a White Lantern, Hal as a Black Lantern, and the Sinestro as White Lantern ones. Those I got. I didn't get the little mini bust. I've since found the White Lantern Sinestro and Black Hand and Iroque Indigo 1. I found those, but I didn't get everything when the movie came out either. But I've gotten a fair amount of that stuff and enjoy it immensely. And we just kind of talk about the Larfleeze Christmas Special for now. Who we are talking about merchandise.
And he's one of the ones I missed from that collection. I didn't get the Larfleeze figure.
So there's a bit of irony there.
Yeah.
But I the one thing I would love to see announced, maybe in terms of merchandising above anything else, is a really good Green Lantern video game.
Yeah, that's asking a lot, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's asking a lot. You know what? I'll be honest with you. I play that DC Universe online, and I got a Green Lantern character as its persona. It's pretty cool. The constructs are pretty cool, and how it works and how it functions is pretty neat. I mean, it's nothing like a Green Lantern game, mind you, but I do know that they have like a story arc in there for, I think it's a Battle for the Light or something like that.
Yeah,
but it's a fun video game.
Yeah, they did a whole campaign series of Blackest Night stuff, and yeah, I played that for quite a while. And the problem I ran into is once you reach the level cap, I had a hard time finding anybody to play with, and everything required you being in a team. And I was like, well, I guess I'm done.
Yeah, true.
But, anyway, so that's looking ahead to 2020. We have some listener feedback, so let's take a quick break. We'll play a promo of some sort for another podcast, and then we'll come back and we'll read a couple of pieces of listener feedback we've gotten back.
All right, that's great.
My name is John Mayo.
And I'm Bob Retall.
What is the Weekly Comics Spotlight?
Comics reviews from 2 fans with 65 years of combined comics reading experience,
who each get and read well over 100 different comics each month from Marvel, DC, and a wide variety of independent publishers.
Reviews that highlight books that may not hit everyone's radar screen since most people don't buy so many different comics each month.
Reviews with honest opinions. We enjoy comics but realize not every issue that we read is a solid gold masterpiece. All in about 30 minutes. So please check out the Weekly Comics Spotlight at www.comicbookpage.com/podcast.
All right, Phil, we've got a couple pieces of listener feedback. So this first one is from John Hiltz, and he's talking about Black Stars #2. And he says, this was another very cool issue for me. I found the Depressoverse Doppel-Zombie Batmanson family to be pretty funny, especially since that's what made Batman finally say enough. It also kind of seems to me that Bezelbeth may in fact be behind Moo's sudden demise, given that she paid a visit to the Empire of Tears right before the wedding, saying that she had something for them to do. She's also been pushing the whole Parallax and I will continue to enforce Moo's will after he dies/ascends, and the fact that he's barely spoken in the 2 issues of Black Stars seems suspicious to me. I'm not buying the whole transcendent mind story that Bezelbeth has been telling over and over. It seemed, after Moo and his 2 other clones dropped dead, that the plan may have been to use Hal's old Green Lantern ring as a wedding ring, seeing as the main Moo was holding it in his hand during the ceremony, and Bezelbeth went and picked it up. I agree with your prediction about Superman and Hal activating the Miracle Machine again and making a universe with no controllers or something, so no Dark Stars, no Black Stars, etc., after defeating Bezelbeth and the Black Stars that didn't use the Green Lanterns. Given that Season 2, Number 1 has been solicited as Hal looking for the young Guardians of the Universe, maybe things don't work out exactly right with the Miracle Machine, and instead of getting the old Guardians back, Hal has to go find these new ones. After all, Hal seems to remember the old universe from dreams that he's been having, but perhaps his recollection is not quite as clear as it needs to be. John, thanks for writing. I think some great observations, and I agree. I think that Bezelbeth is not to be trusted, and I think, like you're saying, she's behind the whole Moo thing. And I forgot about the conversation she had with the 5 inversions, or their version of the 5 inversions.
I always thought she acted. I always thought she acted shady. You know, she was always pushing Hal. You know, which was kind of out of character because Hal's not used to being told what to do a lot. You know, I mean, of course, this is different, mind you, but it always seemed like she was just, I don't know. That's a good observation, though. You're right.
Yeah, and the fact that she killed her husband probably wasn't a bad thing for her to do given the circumstances, but that whole backstory of hers really creates a sense of doubt about her character, even more so than the fact that she's an evil vampire woman to begin with. But certainly she's not to be trusted, and that whole issue really reinforced the fact that she can't be trusted. And yeah, I do think the Miracle Machine is going to come into play. I like his observation about the Young Guardians, because that's something that in the solicitations we did see, and I hadn't made that thought yet as to what leads the need for them to find yet a new set of Guardians. So I'm looking forward to it.
And he ends up on Earth at some point too, I think, in the solicitations.
Yeah, the solicitation for I think the second issue says that he's been assigned to Earth, and so maybe we'll get to see Hal interacting with people on Earth again. It'll be interesting to see. I'm really looking forward to season 2. Some people have complained about the Black Stars miniseries, and it's really it's done creatively to give Liam Sharp a bit of a break, but it's also an interesting story. Just it's an Elseworlds essentially, for lack of a better phrase. I think you and I like it better than our friends over at the Lantern Cast do, but we'll see what happens. I'm interested to see what comes up here in the next couple of weeks in that final issue. But John, thanks for taking the time out of your day to send some comments to us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have Michael Langford, and he is going to be commenting on episode 152. Hi, Myron and Phil. I just heard the latest podcast, and I agree with you on the future plans of the DC characters. I was a hardcore Marvel fan that collected X-Men since the mid-'80s. What they have been doing lately has not been a fun read for me. Some time ago, I started collecting and reading more DC books, such as Superman and Batman. I was also reading Green Lantern since the 90s with the death of Superman, and really fell in love with Green Lantern and with Kyle Rayner runs. I agree with what you said about Bendis coming over to DC. I saw all the X books that he ruined at Marvel, and when they announced he was coming over to DC and jumping on Superman, I knew bad things were coming. Oh man, you could have warned me, Mike. You could have warned me. I, like you, am not excited with the rumors of what they plan on doing with the characters that we've all grown up loving. All these characters have been fine and survived several generations so far. Why is it now that they are now too old and comics need a drastic change to appease the current comic book reader? If this happens the way it's rumored to be, I guess it's collecting back issues for me. Love the show. Well, first on, Mike, spot on. Thanks. Everything was great what you said. Totally agree with you about Bendis. Probably could use a heads up, but next time just forewarn me, because he's not wrong. I don't necessarily like what Bendis has done with Superman. He brings up the 5G thing, and this is going to go back to what we talked about with this, basically replacing the older characters. I mean, but it could just be a ploy, though, right? Could be a different kind of multiverse concept.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you remember the whole Marvel's Heroes Reborn thing that took place? Gosh, it was maybe the 90s it took place, where all the characters, the Avengers died, and all these new characters came out and became the new versions of the characters that everybody knew and loved, and it failed miserably, and it lasted a year, and it all went back to the way it was. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I remember hearing about it. I don't read Marvel too often enough to know what exactly happened in the storyline, though.
Yeah, I didn't read it myself, but it was a big thing. It happened in like 96, 97. And it was a crossover they did, and it ended up being, they canceled a bunch of titles, and apparently the Avengers died, the Fantastic Four died, and new versions of the characters came forth. I think Iron Man was basically a young Tony Stark. He was a teenage Tony Stark that was now Iron Boy.
Interesting.
And it didn't last too terribly long. But 5G reminds me a little bit of this whole thing where everybody moves off the table, a bunch of new characters come in, and then after a period of time it goes back to the way it was. And I don't particularly see 5G becoming anything that's going to last. And it's interesting.
I mean, what's the value in it? You know what I mean? Like, to me, I don't see like there's any value in doing this.
I think the publishers are a little concerned because sales overall are not, they're not bad, but they're certainly not good. And I think they're trying to figure out, well, how do we stay relevant in an age where kids aren't going to drop $3 to $4 on a comic book anymore? And how do we keep it alive when our core audience is aging and they're not getting replaced by a new younger audience? That those audiences would much rather consume these characters in other mediums. And how do you keep the print medium alive, either if it's either in print or a digital version of that print medium? So
yeah, that's a good point.
I think that's some of it. I think that's why we see some of the experimentation we see going on. I think that they're missing the fact that these characters have stood the test of time. It just takes good stories.
Yeah, I mean that's where it lies, is in your storytelling.
It needs to be good stories that don't require that the reader know every nuance of the history of the character.
And it's funny. I mean, as many times as characters have been joggled to and fro, rebooted, reinvented, recharacterized. I mean, over and over and over again, ad nauseum. I mean, this goes back many different generations, overlooking the finer point. Like I like the creative process, and I like when publishers take risks, I mean, like Heroes Reborn, sure, maybe it fell on its face, but it was an attempt at something to see what kind of readers you would gain and to see how well it was going to be received by the public, and 5G would probably be pretty much the same thing, and Dan DiDio, I don't know. I mean, he's done some interesting things with the books, and I don't always agree with the directions he goes in, but I also don't always just be dismissive of him when I'm not sure what I'm getting ready to read. That makes sense?
Right. I mean, I think we're talking about a creative medium where you have to be willing to take some risks. And sometimes those risks are going to pay off, and sometimes they're not. I think, though, that sometimes when you look at things like this whole 5G thing, and we don't know what 5G is. We know the speculation. We know the rumors. That's about it at this point. But sometimes you hear something like that and you're like, well, are they out of touch with the audience? But maybe there's a bigger plan that we don't know about. People by and large didn't like New 52. And were very happy when Rebirth came. I, for one, felt more connected to the DCU during the New 52 era than I do now. And in fact, I'm buying much fewer books than I was buying during the New 52 era, and before New 52. I'm finding myself less and less connected with the universe at large. And some of that's because Green Lantern isn't as tied into it as it was. When you go back and, when we were doing JL May last year and talking about Blackest Night, Green Lantern was infused into the entire DC universe. And so you felt like, okay, this is part of the universe that the characters I love are in. So I feel connected in some way. And right now I don't feel connected at all. And I haven't felt that way since Rebirth.
Yeah, I feel the same way. You're right.
But anyway, I appreciate people taking the time out of the day to contact us, and I do greatly appreciate it. And I hope to hear from more people in the future. Thanks to Mike and John for sending their comments.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, my friend, 2019 has come to a close.
It has. It's been a great year. It's been full of challenges, and it's been full of ups and downs. And 2020 is going to begin with a new baby.
It's exciting times.
It is. It's going to be really exciting. It's we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to go back to work January 6th. We both go back, and I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's pretty much after we go back, it's go time. You never know what's going to happen.
Have you broke the news yet that you're going to name the baby Larfleeze?
I haven't. I'm just going to secretly put that on its birth certificate when I'm in the hospital.
If you make sure your wife isn't looking, you can fill it out. Just sneak it in. She'll
never know. She'll never know. She'll never look at it.
She won't catch it.
She'll never look at it.
Have to have a baby, an orange onesie.
Gosh, what a mess.
Well, my friend.
So yeah, it's going to be 2020. Looking forward to it. I appreciate all the fans that you've had for the years before I came along, and I appreciate all the fans we've gained and since I've come along. It's been great. I love doing this show. Big shout out to my friend Brian. He's going to be reading the Larfleeze Christmas Special before he listens to this podcast. I just sent it to him before this, so that way he gets a taste of it, because he was asking about when we were recording, and I said, well, the next one we're doing is a little bit different, so let me warn you ahead of time. So I wanted them to be able to read this with fresh eyes, and then that way he can listen to us afterwards. So big shout out to Brian, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody.
Yes, to everybody out there, and to you, my friend, the happiest of holidays, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and here's to a great 2020.
Absolutely. Which sadly enough, it's going to be the end of my hashtags. I used to always say keeping it green in 2016, 17, 18, 19. I don't have it anymore.
Oh, now we're going to have to come up with something new.
I got to come up with another creative device. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll think of something.
That's your homework assignment for the Christmas break.
It is. I'll have one by the time we record next. So it'll be one of my New Year's resolutions.
All right. Well, we'll be back with the final episode of the podcast of Asteroid X next month.
Right.
So until then, everybody keep warm if you're living in the cold climate like I am, and treat each other well. Keep that power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day.
And we'll see you guys next year.
The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.